Yeah, hi Tasmanian Tiger fans, my name's Michael Moss, independent Tasmanian Tiger searcher researcher since 1995, mainland Australia only, independent. Now, state of Victoria, mainland Australia, Wilsons Promontory National Park. And if you just scroll down here, you'll see Tasmania, okay, the island state. You'll see on the right hand side there, Flinders Island, on the left, King Island, and that's the southernmost point, Wilson's Promontory, on the Australian mainland. Okay, and they had a massive history of animal introduction. 1908, it was declared a national park, and between 1910 and 1940, 22 species went in, native species, and I think there was a 23rd, and I think it was the Tasmanian tiger. Now, just up here, by the way, I'll just have a bit of fun here, excuse me a minute, as I'll show you where I believe, I have no doubt I videoed a Tasmanian tiger in 1998. Now this is in South Gippsland, Wilson's Promontory, by the way, and where I videoed it was also in South Gippsland, and it was just up here at a place called Mount Best. So you can see there's Wilson's Promontory scrolling back here, okay, and then you just come up here, then you go to Foster there, the township of Foster. And then you come across here to the edge of the Strzelecki Ranges. There's the Strzelecki Ranges there, okay? And on the southern edge, just out the back of Tura North there should be a place called Mount Best popping up. If I can... It's not playing ball, but it's about here. Mount Best is about up here. Okay, just north of Tura to the left. Okay, so there's, okay, oops, a bit far there. There's Tura, so up here and to the left, about here was where I videoed it. Okay, at a place called Mount Best, up on the edge of the Strzelecki's here. Now, what happened down at Wilson's Promontory? There was a committee of management there made up of representatives of the Melbourne Zoo, the Field Naturalists Club of Victoria, the Australian Natives Association, the Piscatorial Council, which introduced fish there. Now, the Committee of Management, soon after its appointment, adopted a policy of stocking the national park, Wilson's Promontory, with native animals and plants and fish of a kind which were believed to be either in danger of extinction or rare enough to warrant special effort to increase their number. It was anticipated that in time the promontory would become the place of sanctuary for Australia's vanishing wildlife. Now, just scrolling down here, let's have a look. Birds that were liberated: the emu, the malleefowl or lowan, white ibis, straw-necked ibis, lyrebird, satin bowerbird, bellminer, pink cockatoo or major Mitchell cockatoo, wonga pigeon. Reptiles were also liberated in the park: Murray River tortoise and the dew lizard, which I'd never heard of. And then they got to the mammals, okay, that were actually liberated in the park. Now, also, in the annual report of 1912 of the committee, they considered introducing the Tasmanian devil in that year for introduction. They were going free range out into the bush. But they decided, without giving a reason, not to liberate the Tasmanian devil. Now, that was the year, by the way, I believe Tasmanian tigers were introduced, 1912. I think that's when they considered Thylacine, but kept it secret due to its horrendous reputation of a stock killer. And you've got to remember, agriculture was the dominant industry in Australia 100 or so years ago. And farmers in South Gippsland and Northern Tassie kept in touch with each other, and it was well known, would have been well known, you know, with the bounty system on these things, what a pest this animal was. And any introduction at Wilson's Prom, well, the farmers would have gone out and basically demanded the government, capture them and shoot them, or they would have put a bounty on them themselves. So here we go. Let's just very quickly go through what was known liberations, okay, that were released. Scrabble grey kangaroo, red kangaroo, Euro or Woodward's kangaroo, Rufus rat kangaroo, plain or Queensland rock wallaby, black striped wallaby, brush or necked or red-necked wallaby, Rufus bellied or Flinders Island wallaby, nail-tailed wallaby, dusky or Bennett's tree kangaroos from northern Queensland, common eastern wombat, King Island wombat, which is extinct on King Island now. It's still found on Flinders Island. It's been extinct for about 50 years, I think, now on King Island. Long-nosed bandicoot. And then still here we go. Gun-striped bandicoot, unknown number. Common grey or brush-tailed possum, Tasmanian black possum. Ringtail possum, short-eared mountain possum, dormouse possum, fat-tailed pouched mouse, greater glider, sugar glider, tiger cat in 1941, the last animals to go in. So 1910 to 1941, most of them went in, the animals, between 1910 and 1915, by the way. Echidna, which is a bit of like an anteater. Koala, of course. Okay, so that was that. Now, these records of this committee, right, are kept at the Public Records Office in North Melbourne. Okay, now you can go online to the Public Record Office and you can order, the day or two before, and you register and order and go in there and view the documents. I'd suggest a 2-hour viewing. Now, here are the file or journal details. You may want to have a look at some of these numbers, okay? VPRS 14555, which is correspondence files of the committee at Wilson's Prom, Committee of Management. General correspondence files of the committee, VPRS 14577. Outward letter books, Committee of Management there at Wilson's Prom. VPRS 3226, minute books, 3227. Committee of Management, and just have a look for the annual reports and have a look at them as well. Okay, now moving on, the interesting thing is that there were three people supplying from Northern Tassie, or three groups, if you like, a couple of groups and one individual. And I know this, they were supplying from northern Tasmania into Wilson's Promontory animals for free-range release. And I know this because the receipts held at the Public Records Office from these three entities I'm going to mention. And there's been a bit of a breakthrough. I've uncovered recently information concerning one of them. Now, a major supplier of Tassie Tiger, by the way, was the City Park Zoo, or Launceston Zoo. Okay, it was a significant source for exporting live Tasmanian tigers, thylacines, to other zoos and collectors between the late 1800s, early 1900s, alongside Hobart zoos and private dealers, contributing to the animal's decline and eventual extinction in Tasmania anyway, with over 80 animals displayed in Launceston, though remarkably no photos of them exist from there. Major supply point. Launceston Zoo was one of the three main hubs, with Balmoral Zoo, which was Hobart and where the last one in Tasmania died in 1936, and a guy named James Harrison's menagerie, supplying thylacines for export. High numbers. This is an AI overview, by the way. More thylacines were exhibited in Launceston than any other zoo, yet no photos, as I said, exist. Now, contribution to extinction. The demand from zoos and the commercial trade for live specimens, driven by public interest, added pressure to wild populations, hindering captive breeding success and accelerating the thylacines' demise. International trade. Thylacines from these Tasmanian centres went to zoos in Australia and overseas, including London, Berlin and New York. Okay, in essence, Launceston City Park Zoo was a key player in the trade that saw these unique marsupials sent globally, ultimately contributing their disappearance. Okay, now, in other words, there were Tasmanian tigers going out of Tasmania at a rapid rate. Okay, and as you can see, a lot of people thought it contributed to their demise. And the Launceston Zoo supplied other species to the Committee of Management at Wilsons Promontory on the mainland for a free-range introduction. So did James Harrison. My theory is that James Harrison, who didn't keep records, we kept 1 year of records in 1928 for that year, I think it was, but apart from that, he was sending Tassie tigers everywhere. And they may not have even known. Okay, my theory is that James Harrison supplied Thylacine to the committee, and he may not have even known, by the way, that where Melbourne Zoo sent them, because he was sending other animals to Melbourne Zoo separately, including Tasmanian Tiger between 1910 and 1915, amongst other years, okay? But it's possible that Launceston Zoo, they were sending him everywhere as well, including to Melbourne Zoo, okay? But there was somebody else here. There's a third player here at Launceston. And that person was by the name, or that company was, okay, that company was, and I'll just get to, this is very interesting because it was Alfred Harrap Son. There's a receipt at the Public Records Office, Wilsons Promontory National Park there, of animals received by Harrap. This was after 1910. Okay, I think it was between 1910, 1915 or 1920. So they were trading animals and lots of other stuff, exports, grains, etc. Huge company. They were doing that for decades. So that's the third one. Now, what's interesting at Harrap Sons, and I had a podcast and I'll put a link to it in my tune in, where I go into more detail about Wilsons Promontory. And I mentioned at the time I didn't know who Harrap Son was. Well, the breakthrough today is I know who they are. And here we go, folks. And they had a connection with Tasmanian Tiger. So that's 3 entities that had Tasmanian Tiger relationships that supplied animals straight into that Prom for free-range introduction. In the Launceston Examiner of the 31st of July 1893, the hammer prices for the sale of sheepskins, hides and furs at the auction rooms of Alfred Harrap Sons are recorded. Amongst the furs are native tiger skins priced from 10 pence to 2 shillings each. As well as trading in skins, Harrap Sons also occasionally advertise for live thylacines. And here it is here, an advertisement wanted, 2 pairs live hyenas or native tigers in brackets, uninjured, Alfred Harrap Son, Launceston Examiner, 27th of May 1898, page 1. Most of the thylacine skins were sold as finished fur products. Now, thylacine is another name for the word Tasmanian tiger, hyena as well. They used to call it zebra opossum and Tassie tiger and you name it. And the Aboriginals had a name for it as well, etc., etc. So that's interesting. They had a connection with Tasmanian Tiger, Harrap Son. So you can't rule out either Launceston Zoo or Harrap Son, but even though this was 1893, remember that this says they occasionally advertised for live thylacines, and they were still trading animals 12 years later. 17 years later on the mainland. Because they supply off 1910 was when it kicked off at Wilsons Prom, but there is a document there, a receipt document for animals received from Harrap Son in the Wilsons Promontory Committee of Management's files. They supplied at least one species of animal into the Prom, whilst they were also, advertising for live thylacines. So I think Harrison is the favourite still, in my opinion, of supplied Tassie tigers, but you can't rule out the Launceston Zoo. and lesser extent Harrap Son. This is a big surprise. I didn't know Harrap Son had any relation to Tasmanian tiger, Tasmanian tigers at all, but they did. And this is all very interesting, and it doesn't surprise me. Alleged sightings of Tassie tigers, from this 1910-15 period onwards in Gippsland, South Gippsland, really fired up. I think it's more than a coincidence given the massive amount of trading that went on, by the way, folks. So that's just an update there. I hope you've enjoyed this. There was prolific exchange of animals that went into that Wilsons Promontory National Park. And in November 1998 at Mount Best, I have no doubt I videotaped it as one of these, probably descendants. Okay, so thank you for your time.